Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President, Excellencies. I have the honor to present OHCHR's report on the situation of human rights in Belarus in the run-up to the 2020 presidential election and in the aftermath. It's the third report under this mandate of the Council. This report focuses on 2023 developments, but builds on the findings of the previous reports and covers events since 1st of May 2020. The Office regrets the continued lack of cooperation of the Belarusian authorities in the framework of this mandate, and OHCHR renews its appreciations to the three experts who have provided advice to the High Commissioner. Mr. Vice President, last year OHCHR gathered additional information that further substantiates the scale and patterns of the violations identified in previous reports. In particular, the Office has found that the cumulative effect of violations of freedom of expression, association and assembly since 1st of May 2020 has closed independent civic space and effectively deprived people in Belarus of their ability to exercise these rights. No opposition party was able to register for the parliamentary elections held on the 25th of February of this year. Both the European Union and the OSCE have expressed concern about these elections, noting the deteriorating human rights situation and regretting that OSCE observers were not allowed into Belarus. This is of particular concern as the country approaches new presidential elections next year. We also observed intensified use of broad counter-terrorism, counter-extremism legislation to restrict civic space. Laws adopted or amended since 2021 were increasingly used to oppress and punish real or perceived opponents. In the course of 2023, several prominent human rights defenders, journalists, and trade unionists were sentenced to long prison terms. In 2023, thousands continued to be arbitrarily arrested and detained for having exercised their freedom of expression and/or assembly, sometimes for actions dating back to 2020. Most of those detained during the reporting period were prosecuted and convicted in trials that, in the assessment of the Office, lack fairness. Lawyers were subjected to pressure, arrested, in some cases ill-treated or tortured, and/or disbarred. Arrests of real or perceived opponents have continued in 2024. For example, on 23rd and 24th of January, over 200 Belarusians, most of them women and many of them family members of prisoners held on politically motivated charges, were reportedly arrested and interrogated, with many charged and convicted for extremism for having allegedly cooperated with an initiative to provide food for prisoners held on politically motivated charges. I also note with concern two recent legal amendments which expand the situation in which use of force by Belarusian security forces is permitted, and I call on the government to ensure respect for international standards and that law enforcement officers are held accountable for any use of force when it is not strictly necessary. Since 2020, thousands of Belarusians have been subjected to cruel, inhumane or degrading treatment or punishment in detention facilities across Belarus. OHCHR documented cases where torture resulted in severe injuries, along with instances of sexual and gender-based violence in detention facilities. Death threats and rape threats were widespread. The conditions of temporary detention facilities for those detained on politically motivated charges may amount to cruel, inhumane or degrading treatment or punishment, and in some cases to torture. In the penal colonies, those serving such sentences were treated in a manner which appeared both discriminatory and additionally punitive as compared to other prisoners. Information gathered regarding the lack of adequate medical care in the penal colonies is particularly alarming. In at least two cases, OHCHR found a violation of right to life of persons who died in the custody of Belarusian authorities in 2023 due to medical negligence. In 2024, two additional prisoners have died in the custody of the Belarusian authorities. OHCHR is also alarmed by the possible enforced disappearance of several well-known members of the opposition serving sentences on politically motivated grounds. I urge the authorities to provide information on their fate and whereabouts, to allow them to meet with their lawyers and families, and to end their arbitrary detention. With regards to the rights of the child, the Office found widespread arbitrary arrests of children in 2020 and 2021 and over 50 politically motivated criminal trials of individuals who were below the age of 18 at the time of the alleged offense. Their trials lacked protections guaranteed to children under international law, and the government has included almost all of them in the so-called list of extremists. OHCHR also found instances of ill treatment and possibly torture of children. Authorities used the so-called socially dangerous situation procedure to remove children from their parents in a way that seemed more focused on pressuring and punishing parents than safeguarding the best interests of the child. In some cases, children were left without care, taken to orphanages, or parents were forced under duress to transfer the custody of their children to a relative or friend. With respect to economic and social rights, the Office found numerous violations of the right to work and education of real or perceived opponents of the government. Many such individuals have been dismissed and found it impossible to find new work. Many were also included in the government's list of so-called extremists, restricting their rights further. In the course of 2023, the Office also noted curtailment of minority rights with the ending of teaching in Polish and Lithuanian languages in public schools. The campaign of violence and repression continued to drive Belarusians into exile, with up to 300,000 people having been forced to leave Belarus since May 2020. Legislative amendments effective since July 2023 raise concerns that the government may revoke some people of their citizenship, which could result in statelessness. The government also took steps to restrict the rights of those in exiles, including preventing the issuance and renewal of passports and other official documents abroad. Reportedly, at least 207 persons were arrested in 2023 when returning to Belarus, and arrests have continued in 2024. It is currently not safe for those in exile to return to Belarus, and I therefore recommend that other member states continue to facilitate access to international refugee protection. Mr. Vice President, in conclusion, numerous violations of international human rights law continue to be committed in Belarus between 1st of May 2020 and the 31st of December 2023. In addition, building on the concerns expressed in this respect in previous reports and assessing the totality of material collected and analyzed over that period, considering the range of human rights violations committed against the population of real or perceived political opponents in a discriminatory fashion, the Office's report describes reasonable grounds to believe that the crime of humanity, of persecution, may have been committed. OHCHR urges the government of Belarus to immediately release all individuals arbitrarily detained and sentenced on politically motivated grounds, and seize all other ongoing human rights violations, including the systematic repression of civil society, independent media, and opposition groups. I call for prompt, effective, transparent, and independent investigations into all past violations of international law occurring since May 2020, with provision of appropriate remedies. As impunity currently prevails in Belarus, I also urge other member states to continue to work collectively towards accountability, including through national proceedings based on accepted principles of extraterritorial and universal jurisdiction consistent with international standards. I thank you for your attention.